Every government claims it protects its currency. History shows something very different. When survival is at stake, governments don't defend money, they use it. Welcome to Wheelixon, where history isn't just remembered, it's used to understand how money, power, and systems quietly break. Every currency tells a story. Not the story printed on the banknote, not the story politicians repeat, but the story hidden inside its purchasing power. Applied financial history shows us something uncomfortable. Currencies are not protected because they are sacred. They are protected only as long as they serve power. And when they stop serving power, they are quietly sacrificed. This isn't corruption. This isn't incompetence. This is design. Modern governments often speak about currency stability as if it were a moral duty. But history reveals a colder truth. Currency is not a promise. It is a tool that can be stretched, reshaped, diluted, or quietly redefined when the system needs time. And every major power in history has done this, not once, but repeatedly. The first lie about money. The first lie people learn about money is that it is neutral. Gold coins once represented trust because they limited authority. A ruler could only spend what he possessed. As states expanded, fought wars, and made promises they couldn't afford, money had to change, not violently, gradually. From metal to meaning. The transition from metal-backed money to abstract currency was not a technological accident. It was a political evolution. Gold restrained governments. Paper liberated them. Paper allowed. Wars without immediate taxation. Promises without immediate funding. Stability without immediate truth. And once money became abstract, it became adjustable. That was the moment currency stopped being a mirror of value and became a management instrument. Why debasement never looks like theft. When ancient rulers debased coins, people noticed eventually. But they didn't notice immediately. That delay mattered. Prices rose slowly, quality declined subtly, confidence remained just long enough. Modern systems learned from this. Today, debasement doesn't happen at the mint, it happens through policy. Inflation targets, liquidity injections, balance sheet expansions, different language, same effect. Inflation is not a failure. It has, as a function, this is one of the most misunderstood truths in economics. Inflation is not merely a mistake, it is often a solution. Taxes are political. Defaults are explosive. Inflation is quiet, and quiet solutions are preferred by systems that rely on confidence. History shows this pattern repeatedly. Post-war Britain, 1970s United States, modern Japan, emerging markets across decades, different cultures, different governments, same strategy. Why systems choose? Time over truth. Truth causes reaction. Time creates adjustment. Every system under stress faces the same decision. Reveal reality now, or manage perception and buy time. Time allows debts to be rolled, assets to reprice slowly, institutions to prepare, elites to reposition. Truth does none of these. Truth detonates. That is why governments rarely announce crises honestly. They don't say, our currency is losing credibility. They say, inflation is easing. Conditions are improving. This is temporary. These statements are not always false. They are incomplete. And incompleteness preserves calm. The psychology of stability. Stability is not about reality. It is about belief. Markets move not on facts, but on expectations about other people's reactions to facts. This is why managing belief becomes more important than managing fundamentals. Once you understand this, modern monetary policy suddenly makes sense. Central banks don't just control rates, they control narratives. The role of central banks. Without conspiracy. Central banks are often blamed as villains. That's lazy analysis. Applied financial history shows something more subtle. Central banks exist to delay disorder, not to prevent it forever, but to smooth it. They absorb shocks. They stretch timelines. They compress volatility. They are not saviors. They are shock absorbers. And like all shock absorbers, they wear out. When stability becomes dangerous, here is the paradox. History keeps repeating. The more stable a system appears, the less resilient it often is. Why? Because stability discourages correction. Low volatility encourages leverage. Predictability encourages risk-taking. Confidence encourages complacency. Eventually, the system becomes fragile, not despite stability, but because of it. Data doesn't disappear. It gets reinterpreted. One of the most fascinating patterns in financial history is not the manipulation of numbers, but the reinterpretation of them. Inflation baskets change. Debt ratios are reframed. Definitions evolve. This isn't fraud, it's adaptation. Because raw data can destabilize systems if interpreted honestly during stress. The quiet transfer of cost. When currency loses purchasing power, the cost doesn't vanish. It moves. From governments to savers. From institutions to households. from the present to the future. Inflation is a transfer mechanism, and history shows that transfers are always political, even when disguised as technical. Why people feel poorer before they understand why one of the most consistent signals before public awareness is behavioral, not economic. People don't say, the currency is failing. They say, my paycheck doesn't go as far. Things feel more expensive. Something feels off. This is reality asserting itself before language catches up. History shows this gap clearly. First, discomfort, then confusion, then explanation. Silence is a signal. When governments stop talking clearly about money, pay attention. Capital controls are discussed internally long before they are announced. Policy pivots are debated privately, long before speeches change tone. History teaches us this again and again. What is not said matters more than what is said. The system doesn't panic. It calculates. Contrary to popular belief, systems do not panic easily. They calculate. They test thresholds. They observe reactions. They adjust language. Only when reactions escape control does panic appear. Why this matters now? This isn't about fear. It's about literacy. Applied financial history doesn't predict dates. It reveals behaviors. And behaviors repeat because incentives don't change. Understanding this doesn't make someone rich, but it makes them harder to mislead. What history never tells you directly. History books often describe events. They rarely describe decisions. They tell you what happened, not why delaying truth felt rational at the time. This channel exists in that gap, between event and decision, between policy and consequence, where this story goes. Next, so far we've seen why currencies evolve, why inflation becomes policy, why systems prefer time over truth, why stability hides fragility. But the most important question remains unanswered. What happens when delay no longer works? That is where history becomes uncomfortable. When time runs out, every monetary system believes it has more time than it actually does. That belief is not stupidity. It's structural, because systems don't feel pressure the way people do. They feel numbers, models, and probabilities. But reality doesn't wait for consensus. Eventually, the gap between narrative and lived experience becomes too large to manage. At that moment, three things always happen. Not sometimes, always. Stage one, trust fractures, not collapses. Contrary to popular belief, trust does not disappear overnight. It fractures. People don't abandon the currency completely. They hedge against it. They hold less cash. They accelerate spending. They seek alternatives quietly. This is why velocity matters more than supply. When people stop trusting money to store value, they rush to exchange it for anything else. Assets, goods, services, foreign currency. This isn't panic, it's adaptation. Stage two, policy becomes reactive. Once trust starts fracturing, policy stops being proactive. It becomes reactive. Interest rates are adjusted aggressively. Emergency facilities appear. New acronyms are introduced. History shows this clearly. The 1970s inflation spiral, the post-2008 monetary era, pandemic era interventions. Each phase followed the same pattern. Delay, stress, reaction, explanation. Never explanation first. Stage three, blame shifts when outcomes become visible, narratives change. Suddenly, inflation is blamed on supply chains, corporations, speculators, foreign actors, consumers themselves. This is not accidental. Blame diffusion preserves legitimacy. If no one is responsible, the system remains unquestioned. Why collapse is rare, and decay is commonmost. People imagine monetary failure as dramatic, hyperinflation, currency burning, total breakdown. But applied financial history shows something else. Decay is far more common than collapse. Living standards decline slowly, opportunities narrow quietly, ownership becomes access, savings become liabilities. People adapt again until adaptation becomes exhaustion. The real cost of delay. The true cost of delaying truth is not inflation itself. It's misallocation. Cheap money distorts signals. Capital flows to speculation instead of productivity. Debt replaces income growth. This creates an illusion of prosperity until maintenance costs exceed returns. History shows that when systems correct, they correct violently because imbalances have compounded for too long. Who pays first? And who pays last? Every inflationary episode reveals a hierarchy of protection. Those closest to money creation adapt first. Governments roll debt. Institutions reprice assets. Corporations adjust margins. Households adapt last. This isn't unfairness by accident. It's sequencing by design. Why savers always lose in delayed systems. Savings represent stored time. Inflation erodes stored time. That is why savers are always the silent losers in delayed systems. History shows that societies with persistent inflation eventually discourage saving altogether. Consumption replaces prudence. Speculation replaces patience. This isn't cultural decay, it's rational response. The psychological turning point. There's a moment a history identifies clearly, but never names. And start asking, how do I survive this? That question marks the end of belief and the beginning of adaptation. Modern systems are not immune. Technology does not prevent this pattern. It accelerates it. Digital money moves faster. Information spreads quicker. Reactions compound sooner. This is why modern crises feel sudden. They aren't. They're just faster. Why this isn't a conspiracy? Story, nothing described here, requires secret meetings or evil intent. Systems respond to incentives. Leaders choose options that preserve order today over risks that threaten it tomorrow. What history actually teaches. History does not teach us how to predict collapse. It teaches us how to recognize delay. And recognizing delay changes behavior. You stop waiting for announcements. You stop trusting reassurances. You stop assuming stability equals safety. You start observing structure instead of narrative. The most important insight, the most dangerous phase of any system is not crisis. It's confidence, because confidence delays correction. And delayed correction is always more painful. Why this channel exists. Willickson is not about fear. It's about pattern recognition, about understanding how money and power behave when pressure builds, not to panic, but to see clearly. Final truth currencies don't fail when people lose faith. They fail when reality overwhelms management. And by then, the decision has already been made. If you want to understand money and power before the consequences appear, not after the headlines, subscribe to Willickson. Because history doesn't repeat, but it always explains what's coming.